So what if you could lose all the weight you want and have the body you want? And do that by changing your relationship with food and naturally reducing your desire to overeat. What if you can feel better right now by learning how to let go of the negative judgments that you make about your body? Now tonight, you're going to learn about a completely different approach to losing weight. Now, it's not a diet-based program. It's a revolutionary mind-body system that teaches you how to actually change your relationship with food and naturally reduce your desire to overeat. Now, I myself am a master weight loss coach and a certified psychotherapist specializing in weight loss and emotional eating. Now, I was overweight from a fairly young age. I was very frustrated, tried lots of diets and would lose weight, but I'd always gain it back. And I realized that, it wasn't about the diet or the exercise program, until I actually learned the real underlying psychological or, for me, emotional reasons that caused me to be overweight. I just kept going up and down. And so throughout the 80s, I started working at various different weight loss clinics, and I found that most people would be able to lose the weight, but they would also gain it back. And it didn't really matter which clinic I went to or which system, the pattern continued. And there was something missing. So I actually went back to school and became a certified psychotherapist, and I had to do about 500 hours of clinical work, and I was taught these really interesting techniques that I started actually using on my weight loss clients. And after seeing a lot of really good results, I started my own private practice, and since then I've helped over 20,000 people in the last 21 years. So now let's look at you. How much weight do you actually want to lose? Why do you want to lose the weight? Do you eat too much or maybe eat the wrong types of foods even though you know that you shouldn't? When you do that, do you tell yourself something like, I shouldn't be eating this, and then perhaps you say, well, I'll just eat this now and be good tomorrow? Is that a pattern or something to that effect that you do? Well, every time you say something like that, you are reinforcing a pattern of thinking, which then becomes an unconscious habit or a program. And so the next time you say, I shouldn't eat this, guess what happens? Your subconscious mind automatically reacts and says, I'll just eat this now and be good tomorrow. It becomes a cycle that's almost impossible to stop. And so this program basically is what determines how you're going to behave. And it's very difficult to stop that because it's on a subconscious level. So one thing that we're going to talk about is learning to release that program or that message by retraining the mind to send different messages to the body and to the mind, actually. When you send a message to the mind, it sends a neurological impulse to the body. Now, first thing we want to look at in creating a solution is to recognize this conflict that most of us have between the logical part of us or the emotional side, or perhaps you can call it the subconscious. The logical side is pretty simple. It has an inner dialogue that says, I want to lose weight, I want to look better, I feel better about myself, improve my health and energy, and improve my self-esteem. And so these are the logical things that your mind basically says to you. And it's telling you if you control your eating, you will lose the weight and all of this will happen. Now, the other side, or what we call the emotional or unconscious side, is basically responding to certain types of emotions. So if we're bored or anxious or stressed or we need comfort, sometimes food is able to give us that instant gratification or that freedom just to say, I really don't care. Okay, so these two are conflicted, the emotion and the logic. One is telling you what to do not to eat, and the other is telling you why you should eat. Okay, now here's the conflict if we look at it in a little bit more specifics. Okay, so what we see here is the logic, which is saying no to the food for all these reasons, and the emotion that's saying yes, okay? And these are all the reasons, perhaps, that the emotion truly wants to get satisfied, really. You know, if we're stressed, food can relax us or take our mind off whatever's happening, or it acts as a reward. So there's a lot of different underlying reasons as to why people eat even they know they shouldn't. Now, this has been created through a process of conditioning. You know, somebody may like ice cream and the other person doesn't like it. So any comfort or feel good isn't as a result of the actual food. It's the conditioning that we've all received, you know, through a period of time. Now, what ends up happening is, let's say in a given moment, you are about to eat some chocolate cake. Hang on a second, we've got a little stuckage here. Bear with me. So yeah, you're about to eat this chocolate cake, and as you're about to eat it, there are certainly some forms of benefit that you are going to certainly get from it. It tastes good, and you know, all the really good things we talked about, the feel good and stress relief and so on, okay? So let's say in that moment you're about to eat the cake. So you are definitely gaining quite a few different benefits, okay? Now, let's say in that specific moment, this is really important, you decide to get on a scale and to put the cake down. So you're standing on a scale, you put the cake down. Now, in that moment, when you put the cake down, okay, is it actually going to help you lose weight in the moment? Absolutely not. Will you feel any better about your body? No. We're talking about in the moment when you put down the cake. You're not going to look any better. You're certainly not going to improve your health or your energy. And so this part of you that lacks self-control basically recognizes that there's no benefit in the moment to not eating the cake. So if you've got all these good things that you can get out of eating cake in a given moment, and there's no immediate consequence, it's not going to really change how your clothes fit or anything like that, then why wouldn't you eat it? Why not have all of these good things in the moment if it's not going to affect you at that time? So it creates a real conflict. And so we begin to justify this, and that's when these unconscious patterns of thinking come up and say, you know, I'll just eat this now and be good tomorrow, and the pattern just continues over and over and over again. Well, the problem is if the logic is telling you not to eat the food, then in essence it's telling you that it can't have all these benefits, you know, the comfort, the feel good, and so you're basically depriving yourself of all of these good things with no immediate payoff or benefit. Not a great deal, if you know what I mean. And so that's why the diet model really is the wrong tool. You know, it's like trying to get a screw into the wall with a hammer. It's just not the right tool. You know, people go on the diet, they stay on it for a bit, they go off of it, their mind is constantly saying no, no, no to the food, and this part's saying yes, yes, yes. So the model itself does not work, and there are some statistics that show that over 92% of people who lose weight eventually gain some weight back, sometimes even more. Okay, so the question is, well, what's the solution? You know, if there's so many diets out there and they generally don't work as a long-term solution, what are we going to do? Well, here's what we're going to do. What we're going to recognize, number one, is that this process here is what creates all of these benefits. Okay, and we don't want to ignore these. You know, we want to realize that we are not just logical beings, so to speak. Okay, we are emotional. And so these emotions are going to constantly need to be satisfied. And we've used food for a long time probably to do so, and just stopping in the moment is virtually impossible. So taking into that account, what we want to do is say, okay, if food is giving us all these benefits, what if we can somehow duplicate? And what I mean by duplicate is allow the same positive feelings or benefits that food gives you, but without food. So as food is triggering some kind of an emotional benefit that really makes you feel good, What if we can recreate that emotion or payoff? Then what happens is, very simply, you will naturally reduce your desire to either eat too much or eat the wrong types of foods, because you're no longer driven. If all of the benefits can be satisfied, then there is no reason to eat the way you are, and it's coming more from an emotional satisfaction. Now, what I'd like us to do is just take a 1-minute break, take a few deep breaths perhaps, or just, let's quiet the mind. We're going to start looking at some of the strategies and the techniques that will help this problem, okay? Because there's a huge conflict in all kinds of unconscious programs. So just take a moment. First thing we want to do is change that program in the mind that says, I'll just eat this now and be good tomorrow. As I mentioned to you, it is a constant force that will always direct you to eat, even though you know that you shouldn't. So that program, that unconscious part of your thinking, definitely needs to be changed. And I'm going to show you a little bit of an overview of how we actually do that. Okay. Now, oops. Bear with me a second here. I'm just going in the wrong direction. All right, here we go. Okay. So I am certain that many of you have had certain situations, obviously, where there is a thought that's generated, even though you don't know what it might be unconsciously, which produces an emotion, which then triggers an action, which is to eat, and that might be a pattern. There is another process where you have circumstances that triggers a thought, which activates a feeling, which then triggers an action which says, no, I'm not going to eat. So there have been many times in your life, I'm sure, where you've been able to do that, okay, where you've been able to control and not eat it. Well, the question is, what did you do to get to this not eat outcome, okay? And it's a very interesting question, and one that will look at how your thinking works, okay? Now, we each have 5 different things that we do in order to go from a particular thing that happens or the circumstance right through the thoughts and feelings and so on until you get to the outcome. So there's a process that I'm going to talk about a little bit later called awareness mapping, where what we do is we help to identify what are these 5 steps that you take to get to this not eating outcome, okay? And once we become aware of that, we simply take 1 moment a day and we repeat that way of thinking out loud, or you write it down a few times until this part will become extraordinarily reinforced and be the general way that you're going to react in those types of circumstances. So all we're doing is we're duplicating this thinking process that's already there, that already shows up when you can say no, okay? And that is a very, very powerful technique because we're already capitalizing and using what's already developed in your mind, okay? So that's called changing the program that says, I'll just eat this now, okay? Now, the next strategy we want to look at is being able to change your self-perception. Self-perception is how you see yourself, your body, and your weight, okay? Now, there's a little model that I'd like to go through just to give you a real clear sense of how this all works, okay? Now, the way this works is every time you have a thought, it actually triggers an action, okay? The action then obviously produces some kind of a result. So I want to give you a very specific example of this particular model and then show you how it applies to you. If we look at an individual named Donald Trump, we've all heard of him. through some biographical information, like they've done research on him and written biographies, they've looked at a thinking process or a self-perception that he has, which is defined very simply as I'm wealthy. That's how he sees himself. You know, the man's gone bankrupt so many times, but every time he comes back on his up on his feet, he's always back to that high level of income. Okay, now that way of thinking, and pay attention here, aligns him to act that way. So he is more likely to act like a wealthy person. So he's involved in real estate and television shows and so on, because that's what a wealthy person is more likely to do. If he does go bankrupt and he starts up again, he's not going to start building little houses, because in his mind, a really wealthy person doesn't do that. So again, he's drawn to the actual actions of how he sees himself. Now, of course, the actions of being involved in the real estate and so on, is what produces the big bucks, so to speak. And having generated that income really reinforces how he sees himself. And so this cycle continues, but it all starts off with his thinking. So his thinking is what's going to determine how he acts. So that is a very, very simple model. And having said that, we want to start looking right now at exactly what are your thoughts about your body and your weight. Take a moment. Are they positive or negative? Okay, obviously most people are going to say negative, because otherwise they wouldn't be on the call. So I'm going to give you the typical thinking process or self-perception of people that I work with. And it's very simple, and it's meant with no disrespect. I am fat. I am overweight. Now, according to that model, people who are fat and overweight are more aligned and drawn to acting that way. If you really think about a moment where you're about to have that cake and your mind kicks in and again says, don't eat this, there's an unconscious or a pattern or a thought that says, wait a minute, I'm fat, I'm overweight. An overweight person does overeat, does eat the wrong types of foods. So you're more drawn to that type of behavior. And of course, that's going to put on the extra weight. And so again, we see this model whereby how you think is going to trigger how you act, which then produces the extra weight, and that just simply reinforces how you see yourself. And again, this cycle continues over and over again. The diets are telling you to change your actions, stop eating carbs and, follow this and do that and so on, which scientifically is okay, but it has no regard, no sensitivity to how you see yourself, to your thinking process. And until that's changed, you are going to continue to come back to these actions because you're driven by how you see yourself. And this is a pattern that for most people who have been overweight for some time will continue to experience over and over and over and over again. The pattern itself is very much like a domino effect. That first thought, that first domino triggers the rest of them to go down. And once they start going down, it's almost impossible to stop it. So what we do is we help people to create a new domino effect with a different thinking process. Now, in a nutshell, how do you change your thinking process that's negatively influenced by your thoughts? Well, consider that if you look in the mirror and you're thinking very negatively, it isn't really what you see in the mirror. It's you looking at yourself in the mirror, making judgments, opinions, telling yourself all of these negative things. There may be somebody who's standing in the mirror with you right now who's 50 pounds heavier, and if they lost the 50 pounds and looked in the mirror with you and you were still the same as you are now, and they lost the 50 pounds, I guarantee you they're going to have a very different self-perception, even though they're the same weight and size as you. So what I'm asking you to consider is that your thinking process about your weight is not about what you see. It's about what you tell yourself, your little story, your tape. Now, the question is it possible for you to change that? Well, of course it is. It's your thinking process. However, it's been repeated so often that the second you look in the mirror, automatically the negative thoughts come up. But there is a system, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, whereby you're able to identify the thoughts that you are actually transmitting to yourself while you're looking in the mirror, and then to be able to change and shift those to a much more neutral way of looking at it. For example, this is an oversimplification, but one of the thinking patterns about your body may be to look at the mirror and say, look, this is my body. I cannot change it in this moment. I can do everything I can to try to change it, but by the time I go to sleep tonight, it will not change. And therefore, it is what it is. It's not good, it's not bad, it's my body. It's like looking at a picture. It is what it is. And to be able to take that on, like trying a pair of new shoes on, the way of being to make peace with your body. That doesn't mean you're happy and you're not going to do anything about it. It means that in any given moment, you can let go of the negative judgments and accept what is in that moment, what your body looks like. And so these are some of the strategies that I recommend for being able to change how you see yourself. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that towards the end. The next thing we want to look at, and this is an extension of your self-perception, this is really the level of self-acceptance that you allow for yourself. And I'm looking at creating a state of unconditional self-acceptance in any given moment, while at the same time to continue to take the actions to lose weight. And so what do I mean by that? Well, when most of us were first born, there were no conditions placed upon us to be okay, to be lovable, to be worthy, to be good enough. A baby doesn't have to do a thing. If a baby can speak, they would say, gee, I have no education, no money, no goals, I don't even brush my hair or teeth, I scream all the time, I urinate, but everybody thinks I'm so amazing. I'm this wonderful being. What did I do? Well, I'm okay just because I exist. That is unconditional acceptance. Now, unfortunately, as time goes on, there are conditions introduced into our life where we are no longer okay just because we're existing. We now need to start doing things. We need to clean our room. We need to behave. We need to do well in school. We need a good education. We need to look good. We need to have money. All of these conditions now are attached to feeling better about ourselves. How we look for women is huge. However, the bad news is that it's true. If you don't look good, there's something not okay. If you don't have an education, there's something not okay. The good news is that the only reason that is true is because you or I believe it. It is not an absolute truth. In other words, is it possible to feel good enough and lovable and worthy even though you are overweight in this moment? Is that humanly possible? Of course it is. Anything's possible. Are you willing to? Because right now you're the one who looks in the mirror and says, I'm not okay. Would you be willing to look in that mirror and say, okay, this is how I look, and I'm still good enough. I'm worthy. I'm lovable. Maybe hard at first, but isn't that a better way to think than being down on yourself and being so hard and judgmental? It's not going to take any weight off. It's not going to make you feel any better. And what we tend to do when we're not feeling as good about ourselves, we eat because it makes us feel good in the moment. So this is challenging all of the reasons. Imagine every reason that you don't think you're good enough or lovable enough or worthy. Imagine taking every single one of those and challenging them and saying, well, wait a minute, is it possible that I don't have as good a job or such and such, and I'm still good enough, I'm still worthy, I'm just as good, is it possible to think that way? Well, most of us don't, because we've been conditioned by our society, by our family, by our schools to satisfy all these conditions. Now, I'm not saying don't and just sit around and say I'm great and nothing matters. I'm saying separate the two. One has nothing to do with the other. You know, if you guys have children and one of them does something really bad, you're not going to stop loving them. You're going to love them just as much. Yes, you may have to deal with the, disciplinarian or whatever you have to do. But there is that unconditional sense of love or appreciation or goodness. What would be the harm in feeling that way about yourself? Think about it for a moment. What would be bad or wrong about you being able to just feel good about yourself? And yes, still pursue the goals, but just to feel good enough, lovable, worthy, all of the things that a baby gets to experience simply because they are. Now, some people, because I do some seminars on this specifically, have called me delusional and said, Rob, how can you allow yourself to feel okay and good enough, when you haven't done this, when you should do that, and so forth? And I say, well, perhaps I am deluded. However, I would prefer to delude myself into thinking that I'm okay and worthy, even though I still try my best to achieve my goals. I would rather think that I'm okay regardless of that than think that I'm not, because to me, that is a delusion. And I'd certainly rather delude myself through life thinking I'm okay. I'll tell you, it's a much more peaceful way to be. I don't think there's any harm in feeling good enough. I don't, boast. I'm not egotistical about it, but quietly to myself, no matter what, I choose to believe that I'm good enough and I feel great about who I am while still trying to improve. But in any given moment, I might as well, because there's no reason, in my opinion, to not feel good enough. Again, I don't want to suggest that we don't care about anything. We don't want to take the actions to get a better job and to lose weight and so forth. I'm saying I'm okay and I'm going to do that. But I'm not going to wait until I lose all my weight to feel good about myself. It's silly, in my opinion. I'm chasing a carrot, and sometimes you never get there. For me, any missed moment to feel okay and good enough is unfortunate, and it's sad. And at the end of my life, I doubt I'm going to lie on my deathbed and say, gee, I'm so glad that on that particular day and moment, I really beat myself up. That's my choice, and I've helped thousands of people cross the line, and the freedom and the lightness that it creates, and the incredible impact that it has on how you feel about your body. And it does carry through into your behaviors on a subconscious level. If you're feeling better about yourself, you're definitely going to be much more drawn to treating yourself better, eating better, being healthier, exercising, and so on, okay, without the usual kind of pushing and motivating and discipline and so on. So this is the third strategy, called creating unconditional self-acceptance. Remember, it's in the moment while continuing to take the actions. Next strategy is increasing awareness. Now, this is a very practical way of investigating the messages that you're telling your mind when you're making a choice to eat that maybe not that great. So there's a series of questions to ask yourself. Question number one is, am I really hungry? A lot of times we're eating mindlessly and we're not even aware that we're eating. It can be at a movie theater sometimes, and I'll be eating a bag of popcorn, and soon enough my hand's at the bottom and I kind of look up and I go, well, where is it? Where'd it go? So a lot of us are eating mindlessly. So if you actually ask that question, am I truly hungry? It's going to shift your reactions at times, not always. Sometimes you're going to know you're not hungry, but you're still going to want to eat. And at that point, you want to say, well, how do I feel physically or emotionally? Am I tired? Am I stressed? Am I bored? Am I anxious? What is going on? What's the experience that I'm having right now that's driving me to eat this way? What is the real benefit of eating more, of another helping, of this, of that, other than the taste, of course? What's it really doing for me? Okay. And then, what do I really need in this moment? And boy, I'll tell you, that is an extremely powerful question to ask yourself in the midst of eating in a way that isn't helpful. For me, I have this relationship with pizza. As I was growing up as a child, we used to go out for pizza with my friends on the weekends, and nobody was hungry, but pizza represented fun. Now, I've trained and conditioned myself over the years, without even knowing it, that when I think of fun, I think of a pizza. Sometimes at 10 o'clock at night, I'll want a pizza, but I've trained myself to go through that series of questions, and it happens automatically. Am I hungry? Not usually at 10 o'clock, not for a pizza. How do I feel? Well, maybe a little bit restless, or maybe I feel like I deserve a reward, or I've worked hard, or something to that effect. What's the benefit of eating this pizza other than the taste? It'll be fun. It'll be social for me, even though I'm alone. But it's that sense of being with my buddies, so to speak. And when I hear myself say that, sometimes it just short circuits my mindless eating. And when I'm then able to, recognize, what is it that I really do need? I need fun. I need to plan a trip. I need to call a friend. I need to do whatever it takes to send the same message to my mind that the pizza would. And believe it or not, sometimes I have this new app on my phone. It's for a pizza place, so you can order the pizza from the phone, and I'll go through the whole process, and I'll order 5 kinds of cheeses. I'm a cheese person, as you may notice. Tons of it, just ridiculous amounts of toppings, and I'll get right down to the order button, and I won't order it, but I'll have had a lot of fun doing that, and that's half of it, believe it or not, but I'm not hungry. Anyhow, this increased awareness and going through these questions will have a tremendous impact, often, not always, on short-circuiting, unconscious, habitual, some people eat well when they're watching TV and they're not really aware of what they're doing half the time. Mindless eating, we call it. A lot of people eat because they say it's there. So anyhow, this strategy is a very helpful one for that short circuit. Now, there will be times when you're still going to want to eat, even though exactly you know why you want to eat and what's the benefit and all of these things. This is one of the most powerful strategies that we're going to get into. It's a way to clear the thoughts and the messages from your mind that triggers the unhealthy eating. So I'm talking about clearing the messages. I'm not talking about fighting and controlling and all of that, willpower way of being. And there is a very specific mechanism that we call the automatic release mechanism. And it's in the mind. We're all born with it. And this will actually release the messages in your mind that makes you eat either too much or the wrong types of foods. And there really are so many messages. Stress. Somehow you're telling yourself, I don't care. I just want to feel good now. I want to eat this. I'll start tomorrow. And on and on and on and on and on it goes. Now, I have a question for you. On a scale of 0 to 10, how much do you think you would improve your eating habits and release these messages to eat if you can let go of any of these negative emotions like stress or anxiety or boredom or frustration or depression or on and on and on it goes? If you can be just happy, content, satisfied, at peace, 0 to 10, how much will your eating habits improve if you release the messages to eat poorly and you are able to sustain a sense of being happy, content, just truly satisfied in the moment and just at peace? Probably a lot. If you're an emotional eater, and most of the people that I work with and I know that are on the call are emotional eaters, and if you could release all of the negative emotions and be content and at peace, I guarantee you know that your eating habits would improve. So a question, why can't you consistently be happy or content or at peace or any of these wonderful experiences and not have these messages to eat poorly? Why? if you can at any given moment, why can't you always? I'm sure that you've had a very clear, easy day where there's no need to eat improperly and you're feeling at peace and content. If you have the ability to feel that way at one given moment, why not always? Well, the obvious answer is that there are circumstances in our life. Things happen. Work or home or with our relationships or finances. There are many things that may keep us from being happy or content or so forth. And I want to do a little analogy here and represent these feelings with this yellow circle, which will be the sun. Okay? Now, the sun is in the sky all the time, and sometimes there are really sunny days. Other times there are not. Same question, if it could be sunny at any given moment, why isn't it always sunny? Why is it not always sunny? Well, one of the obvious answers is that there are clouds in the sky. Now, the interesting thing for me is even on the worst, cloudiest, rainiest, gray day, the sun is still shining. The issue is that we are underneath the clouds and therefore we cannot see the sun, but it's still there. Now, I'm going to propose to me, as being one of the most profound philosophies. What I contend to you is that the same way these clouds are getting in the way of the sun, your thoughts about these life circumstances, about work, about family, about your partner, about your kids, about all of these things produces feelings and thoughts. And at any given moment, the only thing that stops you or I from this peaceful place are just simply the thoughts that we have in our mind about life. That's it. Now, many of us think that we need to do so many things to be happy and content. When we wake up in the morning on vacation, and there's really not much going on, we're pretty content. We don't have to really do anything on the weekends, early in the morning when your eyes open. It's when those thoughts and feelings start pouring in, that is when you aren't able to experience the peace and contentment. So once again, in my opinion, the only thing that stops anybody from being just at peace, content, everything's okay, are these thoughts and feelings. And those thoughts and feelings produce the messages to eat. So let's say we had a giant wind machine. Okay, now I know this is a little bit of an outrageous example, but let's suppose for a moment that we are able to develop this huge wind machine that has the power to blow us through the sky, a force of air that's constantly blowing the clouds through the sky. Well, if that were to happen, obviously it would consistently become sunny. If we can blow the clouds away at all times, then obviously it would be sunny all the time. Wouldn't that be nice? Can you imagine if it was sunny all the time? Actually, a friend of mine just came back from San Diego, where apparently it is sunny most of the time. Some people like the seasonal changes. I'll take the sun. But you were using this as an analogy, obviously. Okay? If we could, we would be consistently at peace with no messages. The stress, the I don't care, the want to feel good, all of these emotions and messages at the bottom are going to be released if we have a way of releasing the thoughts and feelings. And we are going to talk about that right now. There is a mechanism called automatic release. You were born with it. It's the ability to take your focus off of one thing and automatically put it onto something else. For example, you're looking at your computer screen and you're on the phone listening, if you heard your fire alarm go off or your smoke detector, you would immediately, without any thinking, release your focus on what I'm saying and get out of your house. It wouldn't take any effort. It's automatic because you're using this automatic release mechanism that already exists in your mind. Okay, so it's the release mechanism that allows you to take your focus off of one thing and just put it onto something else without really even knowing that you're doing it. Okay, and another example of that, if you happen to be watching a TV show and you really are upset by it, and all of a sudden you pick up your channel changer, press the button, and you're now watching another show, then your mind is immediately taken off that original show, and so your focus is now in a different place. So that's what I call the automatic release mechanism. Now, the technique we're going to discuss is called mind clearing. And what we do is we attach that automatic release mechanism to your breathing. So every time you take a breath, you will activate the automatic release, thereby releasing any feelings or any thoughts that are standing in the way of you being at peace, content, with no messages to eat. So again, all we're doing is we're taking your breath, which is something that we do every moment, obviously, and we're attaching it to that release mechanism, which will trigger taking your focus off of whatever feelings or whatever you thought you have in the moment. Now, the beauty of this is every single time you take a breath, you will automatically activate the mechanism to release the feelings and let go of the thoughts. So the first breath you take will release whatever thought and feeling is there then. The next breath you take will do the next thought or feeling. The next breath the same, and so on. And because you're consistently breathing, you are consistently going to be releasing any thought or feeling that stands in the way of just feeling okay, and any of those messages that are telling you to eat when you know you shouldn't. Now, this is a phenomenal technique in that it not only helps you with this particular scenario, but in many other aspects of your life where it's a work situation and somebody's saying something to you and it's difficult to deal with. You can begin this breathing process right in their presence with your eyes closed, open. Nobody's going to know that you're doing it. And as soon as you begin, you're going to release your thoughts about what's happening as far as anything negative and be able to be in a peaceful place, as you deal with it. Using that fire example, my father, who's a great man, is a very, very stressed person. If we were in a room where the fire alarm went off, he would literally panic. His heart rate would probably go through the ceiling, and he would get extremely agitated and walk out of the room. I, on the other hand, am the opposite. I would simply take a breath, stand up, and say, okay, we have to go. So the analogy here is life happens, fires happen, work happens, things happen. How do you want to walk through life? My choice is to be in a peaceful place, and I'm able to do that by releasing the thoughts and the feelings that are occupying the brain. You know what I'm talking about. And when you sit down to do this technique for a couple of minutes when things are quiet, you are going to release a lot of buildup. And I'm telling you, you're going to enter this place of stillness, quietness in your mind that's just wonderful. It's so peaceful. And whenever you do have these types of feelings, by releasing, you actually step out of it as if you are stepping out of the cloud of these feelings and emotion and observing them and dealing with the situation. Like in the fire situation, I step out of the anxiety. I can see the concern, but I deal with getting out. So it has tremendous impact on releasing these thoughts and feelings, as well as the messages, the important messages that are triggering the eating. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. And as I say, I have taught thousands and thousands of people this particular technique. I was quite young when I was taught it, and it has been one of the most important things in my life. Now, we've talked about a lot of these underlying issues, triggers, programs. There are actually 29 different reasons that people either eat too much or eat the wrong types of foods. And we call these unconscious triggers. Okay? Why? They're on a subconscious level, and they're virtually impossible to stop. Okay? It's the same way as when I said the fire alarm would go off. It's impossible for you to not take your focus off of me and focus on something else. And so these triggers are on an unconscious level. It is absolutely critical to understand your unconscious triggers, because otherwise there is really nothing you can do about it. The only thing you can do is rely on the usual, the frustration of dieting and just the up and down yo-yo. Okay. And we have a special process called awareness mapping. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Awareness mapping basically allows you to uncover the real underlying reasons you eat and anything else that's stopping you from losing weight permanently. Now, the awareness mapping session also includes an overview of some neurotechniques, which are working on the subconscious mind and the emotion. Some of the techniques are the negative to neutral techniques, which shows you how to let go of the stress and negative emotions that causes you to eat too much or eat the wrong types of foods. Neurotechniques also show you how to break bad habits by changing the messages that you send to your mind. Okay. There's also a 3-step power of the mind message to break through whatever's stopping you from losing weight. And when I talk about losing weight, we focus on permanent weight loss. Now, the reason you may want to consider more about the awareness mapping is that you'll learn how to stop that cycle of eating out of control and then restricting yourself. You will discover how to feel better about yourself before you lose weight. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to stop trying, but wouldn't it be amazing, as I mentioned earlier, if you can just let go of all that negative judgment and just feel okay tomorrow? I promise you there is a way, simply by the messages that you send to your mind, and they can change when you know what they are. Awareness mapping also looks at learning how to create the mindset to stay on track, again, by changing how you think about food. And the awareness mapping also has a simple process that can help you change your habitual pattern of thinking within 21 days. So you've probably all heard this, it takes 21 days to form a new habit. Well, your thinking patterns are habitual, so you can do that in 21 days. Now, once you start using the process and some of the techniques, you will change your relationship to food. And when that happens, your desire to overeat will naturally decrease. Because what we're doing really here is retraining the mind to react differently in certain situations where you ordinarily would eat food and send different messages to your mind. And as a result, you really won't be turning to food, the same way that you may be right now. Now, if you want to know more about this process or any of the other neurotechniques that can help you, we've arranged for you to actually have a private awareness mapping session. Now, here's how it works. It's a 2-hour private session done by the telephone, and there'll be also a little bit of a computer visual presentation just as you're seeing here on your computer. So when you're speaking with me, and I would do it privately with you, you'll be able to hear me and also see the demonstration of the techniques and so on. The sessions are done daytime or evening. The regular cost of that session is $145, but if you want to save $50 and book tonight, it saves us a little bit of time of talking to people later. You can do the entire session for $95. You can book at www.coachrobsugar.com, and that's just robsugar.com 3 words. So there's our number. You can register now. And the way we actually do it is we ask for a $25 reservation fee for the session. Then at the end of the session, you would pay the $70 if you're satisfied. Now, I know this is unusual. You only pay the $70 if you are totally satisfied with the session. If you're not, there is no cost, and you will get your $25 reservation fee refunded. So you really don't have anything to lose. You can pay through PayPal if you have a PayPal account or any credit card, or I believe if you're in the United States, you can use a debit card. And if you want to save the $50, I encourage you to book now. There's the website. There's the phone number. I really hope that you have gained some insights today, and I look forward to working with you. You have a good night.